All right, we are live. Guys, welcome. My name is Scott Johnson here with Brains, Brawn, and BS, where we try to connect the dots between financial and physical well-being. All right, so the basis of today's podcast is extremely important. All right, the reason I say that is because we have previously talked about inflation and talked about how that can affect you and your financial position and things that you can do to help kind of improve your financial position, right? Or protect yourself. But the person we have here today, all right, is absolutely epic. We are today talking to Mr. John Truman Wolfe. So what I want to do is tell you a little bit about him, give you a little introduction, John, and then we'll kind of let you tell us about your background. John is the publisher and editor of the Strategic Financial Intelligence newsletter. He is the author of the best-selling The Coming Financial Crisis, A Look Behind the Wizard's Curtain, and we might get into the wizard a little later on here, as well as Crisis by Design, the untold story of the global financial coup. He is also the author of the award-winning series, our Tom McKenna Private Eye series as well, and he hosts a financial hour on Thursdays at 4 p.m. at crn.com on Channel 1. I gotta tell you guys, this guy is extremely sharp, and John, I am extremely excited to talk to you today. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks for the kind introduction. Just a quick note. It's crntalk.com. I don't think crn.com will get there, although I haven't tried it, but it's crntalk.com, and I'm delighted to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Pleasure to have you on the show. So, John, what I want to have you do first is to just kind of tell us about your background and what brought you to write your book, The Coming Financial Crisis. Kind of what qualifies you to write this book?
Well, my background, I mean, if you start academically, I've got a graduate degree in American history from San Jose State University. I actually taught there for a brief period of time, and then was the chairman of the Department of History of John F. Kennedy University in Northern California. So I was academic in my younger years. I left there because my dad, who had a chain of furniture stores, I was about to go to Berkeley for a PhD, and he begged me to come and work in the family business, which I had a young child and decided to do. That lasted a few years, and then it didn't really work out. I wasn't really into being a furniture salesman, but I did handle all the credit there and the relationships with all the banks, and I went to get another job. But there weren't any educator jobs available for teachers. So because I had, one, a graduate degree, and two, a lot of knowledge about credit and retail credit, I got a job with a bank in the San Francisco area, and I was there for some time, became the senior credit officer there, and then later moved to Los Angeles and was the regional vice president of a bank in Beverly Hills for some time, connected up with an old buddy of mine, and I left the bank, and we started a business management company. Business management in Los Angeles and New York is a niche industry. Business managers handle the business and financial affairs of entertainment people. So our clients were actors, actresses, producers, directors, screenwriters, working entertainers have business managers. It's just part of the industry. Right. Pay the bills, oversee the taxes, the investments, this and that. And I did that I was the CEO there for, 20 some odd years. And then retired and started writing a decade or so ago. And I actually started writing when I was the CEO of the companies Wiseman and Burke. uh, which still exists. The name still exists. I've retired, and my partner essentially retired, but the company still carries our name, which is fine, and is very successful in Los Angeles. But I started writing when I was working there, and just I enjoyed it. When I was a banker in San Francisco, I had something had attracted my attention to the World Bank, of Bretton Woods fame. For those of you that aren't familiar, towards the end of the Second World War, the Allies got together to restructure the global financial scene at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. That conference is called Bretton Woods, surprisingly. And out of that conference the dollar became the senior currency on the planet. That conference created the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, two organizations which started out with laudable purposes but became global predators. So I started following the World Bank. I started writing about it, and because of my banking background and enjoying writing, that just kind of continued to the point that I now have, as you mentioned at the top of the show there, the introduction, financial newsletter called Strategic Financial Intelligence, strategicfinancialintelligence.com. And so I write that monthly. And the primary focus, Scott, is precious metals, cryptocurrencies, and of late, lithium. Because lithium's really, to a very certain extent, the new oil, because as the electric vehicle market expands in the United States, and it's not just Tesla, although they certainly have the spotlight, all the major auto manufacturers are expanding their EV entities, and China, India, and Europe are all expanding electric vehicles, and they all need lithium, because you need lithium for rechargeable batteries. You need it for cell phones and laptops and what have you, but a car that uses lithium for its battery, as electric vehicles do, uses 10,000 times more lithium than a cell phone. So it's become a major investment area. I've begun writing about it, researching various companies, and it's here to stay.
Okay. Well, that's something I want to bring up a little bit later on. I do kind of want to roll back to you talking about the World Bank, and also in your book you also talk about the Bank of International Settlements. I believe that's the one that is Hitler's bank. Am I correct in that?
It was a Nazi bank during the Second World War. The BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, a bank most people have never heard about, is I call it the godfather of the global financial mafia, because it is the central banker's central bank. So the central banks of the world are members there: the Fed, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of Italy, the Bank of Canada. There's 55 or 60 central banks that are members there and get their marching orders there. So this is a very powerful institution. And I repeat, most people have never heard that term, the Bank for International Settlements, but it was, as you point out, during the Second World War, a bank that facilitated financial transactions for the Nazis.
Okay. And so what I want to make sure that you guys understand is that we talked about, obviously, the past couple episodes on inflation. So the primary source of money in the world right now is what is called a fiat currency, which we discuss in those episodes. A fiat just means by decree. It means that instead of, let's say, a piece of silver or gold, like a loaf of bread is worth a piece of silver, instead, the government says, no, this piece of paper is going to be what you use to purchase. All right. To purchase whatever you need. And these central banks that John is talking about are the ones that are actually printing this money. And the essential ringleader, what he's discussing, the Bank of International Settlements, is essentially the, I guess, yeah, like you said, the ringleader of the global mafia.
Yeah.
Am I correct in that analysis?
I call it the godfather of the global financial mafia, and you're absolutely correct. These guys really do run the show. They're behind the scenes, but they dictate essentially what banks on the planet will do. They issue rules and regulations which banks follow, and obviously, if you've talked about inflation, then your listeners, your audience knows that it is central banks that create the currency in their countries. And as we have seen this year, because of this so-called virus, the U.S. Fed has pumped whatever the figure is. I don't know, Scott. You may have something closer to the president than I do. I've got a figure of around $3.5 trillion.
Yeah,
into
we're trying to push it to 4.5.
And again, as it sounds like you've explained to your audience, I mean, inflation is basically the amount of money in circulation relative to the goods and services. So if we're all in a room and everybody's got $10 in their pocket, and I'm up the front of the room and I got an orange, and people want the orange, the orange will likely sell for $10. That money will compete for the orange. But if everybody in that room's got $100 in their pocket, then of course the price of the orange will be much higher. And as we note, we've got trillions of new dollars pumped into the economy by the Fed, and the GDP, the gross domestic product, our products and services, which the money is there to buy, although it bounced last quarter, is still very modest. So inflation is coming, at least in my opinion.
No, absolutely. And I just wanted to kind of refer back to that orange. So when he talked about the amount of money being $10, $100 in the room, and him having that orange, he has the only orange. Okay, so what that means is that money, if
Yes.
you have like 5 people in that room that want that one orange because there's so much money and so little orange, then it's going to compete. And they're going to say, okay, no, I'll bid it up. I'll pay 20, I'll pay 50, I'll pay whatever for that orange. Okay, we actually use a pizza example.
Yeah. So orange pizza, whatever. But yeah, that's the concept of inflation. The amount of money in relation to the goods and services. The more money, if the goods and services stay the same and the amount of money in circulation is increased, you get price increases. That's all there is to it.
Absolutely. So that leads me to another question then. So obviously we have these banks and these, banks, and, they're printing out all this money, right? But I mean, who governs these banks? Are they a government institution, or, I mean, how does that work?
Well, of course, in the United States, the Fed is not a government institution. The connection to the government is simply that the president does appoint the chairman of the New York Federal Reserve Bank. There are in the U.S. there are 12 Federal Reserve banks. The powerful one is in New York, and while the president does appoint that person, they are independent of the government. They're called the Federal Reserve. There's nothing federal about them. Their stock is owned by the banks that they, quote, serve, end quote. So they are a privately owned financial institution that, and I'm presuming you've probably talked to your audience about the fact that they simply print money out of thin air. They just click a mouse, Scott. I mean, there's no asset there. They just created out of whole cloth. It's hard for people to grasp, but that's what happens.
Exactly. And yeah, like you said, now it's just a mouse click. So it used to be that they just printed a bunch of cash. In fact, I can't remember, I think it was the Austrian economist Mises, who I think he was invited to Germany or some other country where they were having a lot of inflation issues. And, they walked him up to where they were printing all the money and they said, what can we do? And he said, silence those presses, stop them, just cease, right? Because that is what's causing the inflation.
Right.
And that just kind of always stuck in my mind. So
yeah, it's a good story. Yeah.
So then these guys I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So these guys, these banks all around the world are literally their own sovereign entities, more or less. Like they don't really answer the
It's true for many of them. Some of them are at least more government sanctioned. So they all aren't. They all are not like the U.S. Fed, which is entirely non-governmental. But basically, they control economies. Whether the government has sanctioned them or not, they control the economies. They control the economies by setting interest rates and either creating new money or restricting money, which they can do. So between those two levers, they control economic activity in the country.
So what you're essentially saying is that there is a privately held company that is in control of our economy and not our elected officials.
Exactly right. Despite what the Constitution says, I might add. Right? I mean, the Constitution says, Congress or the House is supposed to create money, the government money, but in 1913 that got set aside, and the Federal Reserve Bank got set up. But that's right. That's the power that they have. You're right.
I going back to the Constitution, because you're exactly right. It says that only Congress can coin money. But
yes.
What's very interesting is that they said it has to be specie, which of course is gold or silver. So while I don't agree with these guys, and I think this is a horrible thing for our economies and our planet, I gotta hand it to them. It's pretty freaking brilliant because it is not Congress. Obviously, from what I've studied, our founding fathers knew about fiat currencies and knew they did not work, which is why they put specie in the Constitution. And here comes these guys on Jekyll Island that say, hey, we're going to go ahead and we are going to make a private bank. So it's not the government or Congress coining this fiat currency. It is this private company. And the Constitution says nothing about borrowing money,
right,
or anything like that. So, I mean, I just found that to be completely brilliant, but absolutely horrifying all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally know what you mean. I mean, it's corruption at a very clever level, and nobody really has been able to confront and deal with this in government. Congressman Ron Paul, was always on in an effort to audit the Fed, and they did get a small audit done during the financial crisis of 2008, just in terms of where the money went during that crisis. But this organization operates completely independently. Every 90 days or so, the chairman goes up and talks to Congress. if you listen to that stuff, Scott, as you may well have done, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook. It's like banker speak, and most of the guys in the committee are going to sleep listening to that junk, and they don't have any basic economics going. So yeah, I mean the book that you referenced, The Coming Financial Crisis, deals with how the Bank for International Settlements got its finger into and caused the crisis of 2008. But beyond that, talks about you've got all these central banks that are pretty much autonomous, running the economies of countries. And then you've got this senior entity basically dictating to them as they fly in for meetings I think it's every couple of months. The central banks fly into Basel. So it's interestingly, which is in the book, and but just to tell your audience, the Bank for International Settlements they're in Switzerland. Swiss law doesn't affect it. Their employees are immune from prosecution. They have their own law enforcement or militia on the property. This is a entity in and of itself above the law, running the planet's finances.
Okay. So you're telling me that basically this Bank of International Settlements, the government, even if they wanted to, could not necessarily do anything about any of their activities.
Nope.
What the hell? and they're literally, I guess this is where you get into cartel territory as far as I'm concerned, with a puppet master pulling the strings of all the other banks.
Yeah.
And, wow, that's pretty freaky. Well, then I guess that leads to my next question. So, I mean, how do you see this manifesting over the next few years? Obviously, we are with the whole COVID thing, and before this, we're talking years before this whole thing. Our economy was slowing 2 years ago, right? And then all of a sudden, we had this crash triggered by COVID. Now there's all this uncertainty, all this unrest happening. How does that factor in? How does the BIS, or Bank of International Settlements, and the cartel factor into what's going on right now? What can we expect?
Well, what we can expect are what are called CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. The Bank for International Settlements took a survey last year, at the end of last year, and found that 80% of the central banks on the planet were in the process of either testing or piloting, or in some cases had accomplished replacing cash with zeros and ones. Digital currencies are coming. Now you have two different areas for this. So I'm going to mention this so people don't get confused. There is the cryptocurrency universe, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, etc. Bitcoin was the first. It was the only cryptocurrency for, a couple of years. Then others started to come. There are now 7,000 cryptocurrencies.
And counting.
But these are decentralized digital currencies, meaning there's no central authority. You can't go sue Bitcoin. There isn't any board of directors. There's, it's out there by itself. And most of the other cryptos are that way. Mm-hmm. As opposed to central bank digital currencies, which would be zeros and ones replacing cash in your bank account. And this is happening all over the planet. The major industrial nation that is implementing CBDCs is China. They have 4 states that are actually operating on digital currencies, meaning the people, the individuals, the citizens have digital currencies in their bank accounts. People are being paid in digital currencies. So this is coming. And to answer your question in terms of what's coming, digital currencies are coming.
Yeah.
And it's why I recommend that people get some precious metals.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I actually want to move on to precious metals next. But when it comes to the digital currencies, I did want to bring up one interesting point. And so, can you tell us about? So, obviously, these central banks are moving. There's a war on cash, okay,
Yep.
and there's a definite deep-seated reason for it. And I believe that that reason is well exemplified in what happened in Cyprus back in, I believe it was 2014 or 16. I can't remember what year. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened and kind of like why they're kind of trying to move away from that cash?
Well, what happened in Cyprus was the test policy for it was a pilot program run by the European Central Bank to test bail-in policy. Now, this is information for your listeners, which most people don't know. If a bank is troubled, they're going under, they made a bunch of bad loans. Under bail-in policy, the bank has the right and the authority to take depositors' money and convert that money to bank stock without the depositor's permission. This is called a bail-in. It is official policy in Europe. It is official policy in Canada. And if your listeners want to check it out, you can go online and see a paper written by the FDIC and the Bank of England jointly on how bail-in policy would work in the United States. So banks can take your money without your permission and convert it to bank stock. That's called bail-ins. To get back to your question, the test in Cyprus was just that. It was just a test. It was a pilot, because that's what happened in Cyprus. They took people's money, as you may know. The bank was having trouble. It was going into default. They took depositors' money. They converted it to bank stock, and the depositors lost large amounts of cash. It was a test. And members of the central bank, a key member of the Central Bank of European Central Bank, said as much. So this is policy that exists, this is policy that was put out by the Bank for International Settlements. And I think the reason for that is because banks are pregnant with securities called derivatives that are, most of which are interest rate bets. That's all. They're just like casino-like bets from Vegas. B of A thinks the interest rate on Greek bonds is going up. Deutsche Bank thinks it's going down. They bet. Then people bet on that bet. Then people bet on those bets. And there is today, Scott, and I can't, we can talk about it some, because I could talk about it at some length. But there are today 1.2 quadrillion dollars worth of derivatives on the planet.
Quadrillion.
Quadrillion. I think that's 15 zeros. And about 75% of those derivatives are what are called interest rate swaps, which are, as I say, Vegas-like bets on the direction of interest rates. So the BIS saw this, saw that the banks were full of these things, and issued, because I think somebody's going to stick a pin in that bubble. And so, and so the BIS issued bail-in policy, which protects the banks. If they go south because of their derivatives exposure. JP Morgan Chase has got about $50 trillion worth of derivatives exposure. So
Isn't that more than they had during the financial crisis of 2008?
yes, yeah, yes, it
So,
is.
so the problem wasn't fixed because I know bailouts are now illegal,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So all they're doing is swapping to this bail in and literally instead of printing the money and stealing it from us that way, what they're doing is legitimately just stealing the money that we have.
The truth of the matter is they're doing both. Um,
Oh my god.
they're actually doing both. So
Okay.
uh,
Oh, I did want to make one point really quick. So there is a movie that it talks about the 2008 financial crisis. God, why can I not remember the name of it right now?
yeah, the one. Yeah, I
Big
remember it.
Short. The Big Short.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. So you were talking a little while about derivatives and casino-like bets. So I challenge all of you guys to go ahead and watch The Big Short if you have not seen it. I know it is on. I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix, and I bought it because I literally watch it like once or twice a month to keep
Wow.
the ideas fresh in my head. I
Right.
literally do because there are certain things that it's. That's why we archive all these episodes, John, is because repetition is how we learn. And even if I watch a video one time, I'm not. I may pick up one thing and run with it, but I could forget it in a week.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. I understand.
listening to it 2-3 times. So watch that movie, you guys, because they actually have Selena Gomez is the person that's actually showing you about how that works.
Yep.
So definitely worth getting in watching. Now, I do want to go ahead. We are getting close to our ending time here, so I do want to move on to kind of what each because these everyone who listens to our podcast now. This is a worldwide podcast, so if you can take a more of a global perspective, then feel free, but don't feel obligated. But what you had talked earlier about precious metals, okay, and allocating a portion of wealth. In fact, I was actually reading an article of yours where it talked about taking assets and putting it overseas in certain banks, Hong Kong being one of them, which is very interesting. I'd love to hear about what you think regarding Hong Kong now with the whole thing that went on over there, which I'm actually going to write that down because I do want to hear what you have to say about that. But tell us about precious metals. Why do our listeners want to invest in them? Why do we want to own them?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Technically, silver and gold, precious metals have started a bull market here in the last year or so, and have been moving up, and will continue to do so, in my opinion, for another couple of years. That said, you can go back to the basics. Gold and silver have been money for 5,000 years, Scott. This is real stuff that has holds its value over the years. Yes, the price goes up and down, but in the kinds of circumstances that we're talking about, one, it happens to be in a bull market, which is great, and secondly, it's insurance, because if bank accounts convert to zeros and ones, which they're going to do, this isn't conspiracy theory stuff. It's not tomorrow, but this is coming. Bank accounts are being converted to zeros and ones. Cash in your lifetime, cash will be gone.
Yep.
Cash will be a relic.
As
So having real money, gold and silver, is a smart thing to do. I'm not saying put everything in there, but I encourage folks to do so. More silver than gold, just because, if things get really nasty, it'll be easier to go to the grocery store with an ounce of silver than an ounce of gold. I mean, an ounce of silver today is, I don't know, $30. Gold's 2,000 something. So, that's why I favor silver. But both of them, whether silver or gold, I would strongly encourage. So, and that's that's why it's they've held their value for centuries. They'll continue to do so. Um, People agree that they're valuable, and they are. I mean, look, if bank accounts get converted to zeros and ones, your Fourth Amendment rights are gone. You go into the doctor
That's
or
true.
to see the doctor, and you pay him for a visit. The doctor takes the money. Now, these are digital currencies. The doctor takes the money. He pays some money to the pharmaceutical industry to buy some drugs. The pharmaceutical industry takes the money, gives it to its lobbyist in Washington. The lobbyist in Washington pays an escort for a congressman for some kind of event. The escort takes the money and gives it to a plastic surgeon to get some new body parts. The plastic surgeon gives it to his cocaine dealer. So obviously,
truth.
the point is that the central bank can follow every single zero and one all the way through that scenario.
All the way.
You will have no privacy whatsoever. So that's why I'm a big fan of gold and silver.
Absolutely. Okay, and I did want to kind of rewind just a little bit on the value of gold and silver, and it's because of, and this is something I teach my daughter too. I'm big into. I'm not sure if you've heard the Tuttle Twins books, but they teach about basic financial principles as well as freedom.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, they're really fantastic books. In fact, I'll be interviewing Connor Bayek coming up here on the show. And so gold and silver, guys, has what's called intrinsic value.
Yeah.
What that means is that it's got value that there's no compromise. If you say, hey, I got some bread and I want that bread, I can give you a piece of silver and it has that intrinsic value because for many reasons that we could go into, but we're not going to. But you will accept that because you know that you can trade that for something else.
That's right.
Now, and cash right now is the same way by decree, of course, right? But one thing that's really interesting, I was thinking about this earlier. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Is that a lot of people have the mindset that they are putting their dollars in a bank, and that bank is storing their dollars so that when they need it, they can go draw it out, or they can swipe their debit card, even though they're tracked, right? But I contest that every dollar you put into a bank is actually not your money anymore. In fact, it's not even money. Instead of a dollar, it's actually a deposit. And that deposit is actually you lending the bank money and them lending it back, and they can use it for whatever they want. They can lend it to business owners. They can lend it to people who want cars. I don't know. Whatever the hell they want to do with it, they can lend it. But what's happening is we're going through a transition where they don't want you to have that cash anymore. They don't want you to have that cash because if you have the cash on deposit, remember, it's not money. It is a deposit once you put it in the bank. All right. They can do whatever the hell they want to do with it. And that's exactly what John just talked about with a bail-in. And so a way for us to hedge against and you can get into conspiracy theories and talk, oh God, this is all conspiracy BS. You know what? Whatever floats your boat, right? But in the end, what John is giving you is a way to protect yourself from the tyranny of not just government, but also a financial cartel run amok. Am I kind of right in any of that?
Well,
correct me, please.
And I'm gonna have to scoot here in a minute, but let me just
sorry about that.
take this last very important point that you made, Scott. When you put money in a bank, it is no longer yours. Mm-hmm. It belongs to the bank, and you are an unsecured creditor, no different than if you laid the carpet in the bank's lobby.
That's
They
it.
they owe it to you. You're a creditor, but the money now belongs to the bank, as Scott was saying. So deposits, to check with your local. The bank may deny it, but you can check online or with a good attorney. A deposit in a bank converts the ownership of the deposit to the bank. So it's no longer yours. I repeat, you're a creditor, they owe it to you, but it's theirs to do with, as Scott said, to do with as they please. So, the fact of bail-ins, the fact that the deposits aren't really yours anymore, are reasons to beef up your reserves into gold and silver. You won't go wrong over the long term. Gold and silver go up and down every single day. Doesn't mean it's going to go up every day. It won't go up every day.
Yep.
But trend-wise, it will. And if I can leave your listeners with one bit of information, get some precious metals.
Okay, absolutely. And honestly, guys, that's something that I've talked about before. I mean, you're just hearing it from someone who's a hell of a lot more credible than I am, right? So I do want to try to sell some financial intelligence newsletters for you. So
okay.
Can you give the listeners a little bit more information on your newsletter, how they can get it, maybe the cost? That'd be fantastic.
Sure. So again, the newsletter is strategicfinancialintelligence.com. It's a bit of a mouthful, but strategicfinancialintelligence.com. It's a monthly newsletter. The focus is primarily precious metals, digital currencies, and lithium, which we talked a bit about at the beginning of the show. I get into other areas as well, but the primary focus is there. I make investment recommendations in terms of gold mines, lithium mines, that kind of thing. I also do assessments of banks, what makes them strong, what makes them weak. And then each week, so the person gets the newsletter every month, but every week I do a radio show and or a podcast not dissimilar to yours, and we have it transcribed so that subscribers to the newsletter get both the newsletter and then weekly they get the radio show transcribed and or the podcast transcribed. So they're kept up to date. The cost is $2 a week. It's $99 a year. Hopefully for the information that I'm providing to you, that's a hell of a deal.
Exactly. And if you really look at it, it's not really any different from any of the other, because I also have a subscription to, I'm not sure if you've heard of Gerald Celente in the Trends Journal, or Harry Dent and companies like that. But honestly, $99 a year is absolutely nothing. And for the information, obviously, from this podcast, you can tell that John Truman Wolf is sharp as hell. And if you want to get financial advice from anybody, it is someone who has this experience and who can navigate the financial system and understand what is coming. Because what is coming is what could ruin you, right? Or could you succeed? Either one, but it's your choice.
Exactly correct, Scott. And people should be educated so that they can make the right decisions.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you. John, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I don't get to talk to a lot of people who, like, my mind kind of clicks with, but after I read your book, I felt like it was a perfect segue between Rich Dad Poor Dad and The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's kind of that mid ground that helps you understand the massiveness that is The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, thanks for having me. That's great positioning with those other books. They're classics, and I appreciate the time on the show. And hope to get some of your viewers to subscribe, and I promise you we'll be providing some stunning, eye-opening information as the time moves forward.
And that is something I have no doubt of. Again, guys, thanks so much for John Truman Wolfe coming on the show and throwing down the law, helping you understand how Hitler's bank is coming for your money. All right. Now, remember, strategicfinancialintelligence.com is his newsletter. Also, be sure to check out his book, The Coming Financial Crisis, A Look Behind the Wizard's Curtain. I bought it on Audible, so I haven't actually read the pages or highlighted, but I listened to it twice. It was absolutely fantastic. Make sure you get it. Tune into his radio show. Again, that is crntalk.com. Thursdays at 1 p.m. and
4 p.m.
4 p.m. 4 p.m. Yes, 4 p.m. Channel 1, 4 p.m.
There you go.
All right, yep, that's my long-winded outro. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Brains, Brawn, and BS, you guys. God bless and have a great day, and I will see you on the next round.